Hey, what's going on, my fellow human beings? This is Robert Roach with the Type 1 Planet podcast, and I am here with another episode from The Vault. This was an episode recorded early on that we lost for a while, and we've got it back. And so if you're watching, you can see me with a very ridiculous mustache. And this interview was with Connor Borrego, and Connor is a specialist in Web3, cryptocurrency, crypto wallet technology. He's an advocate for digital rights, and he's the CEO and founder of multiple companies, currently Playhaus, which is a smart wallet for content creators. I don't think that was the case when we recorded this episode a while back, but this is a really interesting episode. On the internet, your virtual identity and your personal data, they don't belong to you. There's a vast amount of data that makes up your behaviors, your preferences, your demographic, and that information is actually the product that big data companies collect and sell to highest bidder. And, in a world where significant parts of our lives exist solely on the internet, this practice has gone from behind the curtain to center stage. And there's a complex ethical problem that needs to be solved as the digital era begins to mature. And Connor likes to imagine a world where your data and your virtual identity, they belong to you, where you have an advanced yet simple to use tools to protect your data, and where you and not a major corporation have the ability to shop your own data out to the highest bidder. So in this interview, Connor presents real-life solutions on how to make this possible, in which internet users can utilize encrypted browsers and crypto wallets to, quote, put a condom on their data, which we'll get into, and open a direct line of communication with companies that would like to purchase the data directly from the user. So let's talk about how we can explore alternatives to the big data ecosystem where power is returned to the consumer, and where we can discover an internet model that's technologically advanced, transparent, and where human beings can communicate, coexist peacefully and equally and morally in a virtual environment. Enjoy this episode. Please visit us at type1planet.net or at type1planet on social media, and I'm excited to hear what you think. Hello and welcome to Type 1 Planet. I have the pleasure of being here today with Connor Borrego. Connor is the CEO of Emergent Digital, and he's also the founder and chief product officer of Unipro. So Connor, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey Rob, thanks so much for having me on the show. I'm very excited to be here today.
Fantastic. So to begin, why don't you describe the work you do, but not from a technical perspective. Instead, let's just approach it first from a mission perspective. What is it that you as a person are trying to accomplish in your life?
So I think what my mission ultimately is someone who works in software, in data, and digital marketing. I wasn't really sure what exactly was driving me for the longest period of time, but as I was working at Google, when I got to work with small business owners and actually have an impact on their lives and their businesses, that was when I started to see something more meaningful come out of it. And what I mean by that is basically that, I was in a role where I was supposed to be consulting with startups that had raised millions of dollars, but I had to be in conversations with lots of different businesses along the way to qualify which ones I was going to work with. And a lot of the small mom and pop shops that I would encounter have really great fundamentals in their advertising accounts, and with a few tweaks would save a lot of money and be more efficient with their advertising spend. But there'd be no opportunity for me to upsell them, which was my job at Google. So me helping them was incredibly satisfying and fulfilling, and something I did despite it not really being in my job role, because I was already having those conversations. And because I was finding meaning in that work that I was not being paid for, that's kind of why I quit my job at Google to go kind of help small business owners to tackle the challenge of integrating all their technology and data into a way that's actually profitable for their business. Because with so many systems to manage, you can't be working on your business and in your business at the same time. And that's a real problem for small business owners whose bandwidth is sucked in so many different ways. So for me, this is all about a mission to help people free up their time and work more on the projects that they're passionate about, and spend less time doing a lot of the administrative work that needs to be done to run a business. Because I don't think anyone really needs to do those things, because the software exists to automate it at this point. And it's just about helping educate people on how to set themselves up for that type of success. And so for me, that's my mission, is to help people and small business owners to take advantage of digital technology and systems. But sorry, it was a convoluted way to get there. So
No, that's perfect. And one of the reasons that you and I connected and really decided to have this conversation was having conversations around data management, and moral ways to use, ethical ways to gather and utilize consumer data. And you seem to have some really interesting ideas around that. And so that's something that I would love to dive into with you today for sure. And is that part of your work that you do with the small business owners, is kind of educate them and give them choices around that instead of just saying, give it all to Google,
Yeah, so unfortunately, the reality of the situation is, in a lot of instances, it is give more of your data to Google right now. It's sort of more of a compromise. But in exchange for that, as a small business owner, you are going to see the benefits of like cost savings from sort of contributing to these data systems. But to your larger point of, are there more ethical ways to do this than just give your data to Google? That's what I think I'm working on. That's what I think the whole Web3 movement's all about. And so I'd love to go more into detail on that further in the conversation. But yeah, I unfortunately right now, our hands are kind of tied in what solutions are available for small business owners today, and the reality of what that means, for your data ownership. But that's why it's so important to be educated on why the technology that's being implemented now matters.
And that is such a foundational part of what Type 1 Planet is all about, is realizing we are laying this foundation as we speak in terms of all Web3 is being born. We're laying down this incredible foundation that began with the advent of the internet and everyone being able to instantaneously communicate with each other. But what we do right now is really important. How do we manage things like personal data in a world where everyone's lives are starting to exist online? So one reason I was really excited to talk to you is you seem to be an educator, a natural educator, and you are often on podcasts explaining what NFTs are and all that stuff. So I appreciate you lending your skills in this place. Let's start with some of the basics. When you refer to Web3, what are you referring to, and how does it actually work?
Yeah. So I think there are two different schools of thought when it comes to Web3, and I'm really not going to address either of them. I'm just going to kind of talk about what I see Web3 as. But Web3 is coming out of blockchain technology, which is the idea that instead of having cloud computers that are owned by Google, by Amazon, by Microsoft, we had a cloud software that was run by a bunch of computers all over the world. And that distinction is very important because the way that data is stored today in the cloud, it's not in some nebulous, out there ether. It's at a physical Fort Knox type location somewhere in Middle America. And that is where Google, where Amazon are setting up racks and racks and racks of servers with energy grids kind of dedicated to supplying those servers, and teams of engineers built around maintaining them. So it's not like those servers aren't going to be useful, but the problem is right now they're all owned by 3-4 companies. And what that means for software providers is it's much cheaper and easier for them to build software applications. That's what the Web 2 movement was all about, was taking advantage of cloud technology and being able to make it really cheap and easy for an entrepreneur with a business idea to deliver a software product online or to build a community online. But in exchange for making it easy, you gave up rights of ownership of that data. Web 1, which people like to think of as just the read internet, that's kind of what people have been talking about. You could absolutely do far more than just read on the internet. It was more about the responsibility of a company that wanted to have a website, that wanted to have an application, to not just build the front end interface, but to build the server architecture behind it, the cloud basically. So blockchain is reinventing that first version of the internet when everything wasn't just powered by 4 cloud servers. It could be powered by, any computer around the world running the same software. And
it's interesting that you're bringing this up, because we just built the Type 1 Planet website. And one of the big questions I had was, can I build a website in a more decentralized way, where I'm not just giving my, I'm not just building it on Squarespace and without asking questions of where the servers are and what they're doing and how my data and information is being utilized. So we went through it was interesting. We used Cloudflare, which I'm sure you've heard of, and Cloudflare is one of these interesting decentralized, maybe you can explain it better than I can, platforms or servers where I can host my website. And then I found a place where I can, through Cloudflare, I was able to get my domain at cost from, the ICANN nonprofit, which I've recently learned about as well. So there's all this stuff that nobody knows about. They're saying, oh, just like you said, Web 2 is really easy. You can just use these incredibly easy to use platforms to make a website, but you're giving up a lot in the process.
And I think the easy to use website is less the focus, honestly. It's more the easy to build website part. And that distinction is kind of critical, because now that they've been so easy to build, we actually have seen what the majority of the common use cases are for building. And this is why Web3 is so critical, is because we now know what a lot of the product offerings look like. We can start to standardize the sockets that, contain and store standard pieces of user data. If you think about social media, for example, that's the easiest thing for most people to grasp. You are voluntarily giving up not just your census information, your demographic background, your identity that you belong to, and all the other things you espouse and believe in, but then your network, your graph of people online that you're connected to, and the way in which you're engaged with those individuals. And those two pieces of information are incredibly valuable to advertisers and the data economy that revolves around buying and placing advertising units right on your screen. So when we start to think about the fact that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of platforms that make it easier to send out emails to your newsletters and readers, there's no need to reinvent the database that stores that information over and over and over again. You can just make the front end look of the product, pretty for whatever niche you want to, but the data in the back end is going to remain the same. And that's what makes Web3 so powerful, is we start to actually agree upon what these standard, plugs look like. The internet will actually become this idea that it's composable, and you can take your digital identity and go from one website to the next website to the next website with all your data contained inside of a little mini vault.
All right, so let's jump into this. The vault. I remember one thing that you said to me that really got my attention the first time we talked was putting a condom on your data. So yeah. Let's start from the beginning. I mean, I'm assuming that our listeners are knowing nothing here. So you did mention the blockchain. They definitely have heard of it, but maybe they don't know how it relates to this conversation. So maybe you can start there and we'll move up to the condom.
Yeah, it's going to be a segue for sure. So starting with the blockchain, right? Bitcoin released their white paper, I think it was in 2009. And it was, an anonymous person. Some people think it's the CIA. Some people think it's this guy in Australia. Who knows who the person behind Bitcoin really was. But inside of that white paper was, it was a scientific white paper that was explaining, the theory of this monetary system that, what had a finite supply of, units that would ever exist, and the time period at which we would, infinitely, because it's all based off logarithmic algorithms, right? As you move forward in time, the pieces of the Bitcoin that you're mining get infinitely smaller, more and more scarce. Unnecessary details to understanding this, basically. But the way that Bitcoin works is that every transaction log to the Bitcoin database is linked to the next transaction, and it's linked using cryptography, so that basically, if you want to change one of the blocks, you would have to go through the process of changing every individual block because they each have a different password key connecting them to the previous one. So this is what the idea of Bitcoin is unhackable is all about, is the longer that they've been running this data server, the more computer power it would require to rewrite the history of the transactions in that database. But this database, Bitcoin, purely records the exchange of its digital token. It doesn't record any other information to its database. So it's more of a concept from when we're talking about how does this technology actually replace, centralized server architectures that run the cloud. But in terms of what it was showing from a monetary system is you could build this very simple mechanism, a server that everyone could trust to record a store of value that wouldn't be relying on one server or one person controlling a server or one organization controlling a server to have trust that the transactions haven't been manipulated. And when you take that technology, the cryptography that's linking each block back to each other, and you apply that and use that with transactions beyond just financial exchange, you use it exchange of information that every single time you take an action in an app or on a website, there are a series of events, of pipes that you could imagine are going on behind the scenes in the background. And each one of those events is being recorded to a database to say this thing fired and happened. And that way we can use that as software engineers to go back and look and figure out where the thing went wrong in the worst case scenario. Or we can use that information to say, hey, we showed this many ads to this person today. But it all needs to be logged and recorded somewhere. And that's what this blockchain technology is all about. The logging of information in a way where we don't have to trust the people who maintain the database, because there are so many people.
I think I really do think I'm starting to understand this now. So this ledger is publicly available to everyone. Mm-hmm. It's a decentralized ledger. It is available everywhere. It's run by as many computers as are connected to this network.
Exactly.
And because of that, by decentralizing it, it's much more secure from the perspective of being able to be hacked or being able to be, because the accountability is now visible and accessible by as many computers as are on this network. So every time that you have a new transaction or a new piece of information, it gets added like a little link on the end of a DNA or on on the end of a chain. And you can look at that link and you say, there's something interesting here. There's something I'm not quite sure. And you're able to directly and it like almost linearly go back and find exactly where that information originated from. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Excellent.
No, and that's the way that computers work today as well. But the biggest difference being the not having to trust the people who are running the server part. Because the way that it works now, let's say that I didn't like some data in there for whatever reason. Right now, I, as just an engineer with the right level of access to a database, can write, a piece of code that says update this section of information to say this instead, right? And if that information was related to economic transactions, that could be fraud. If that was related to people's healthcare information, that could be some sort of HIPAA violation. There are so many ways that this becomes really complicated, and that's why it's like network security at large corporations is as big of a priority as it is for them. And that's because their engineers, the way that these servers are structured centrally, have the ability to see inside the black boxes that most people are just imagining, how they work. They're the ones who are like inside there building the black box. And because of that, they're interacting with all the raw data, all the exposed information that isn't necessarily anonymous.
And this is where the reason that you reached out to me in the first place was the phrase, the democratization of knowledge, was a big part of the Type 1 Planet mission design. And there what you just described is a full autocracy of knowledge, right? It's they have they have access to incredible amounts of data, and we don't know what they're doing with it. And they're creating an output. We're giving input. They're creating an output that people are enjoying. But what's happening in there is something that we don't actually know what's going on. And
we know that they're making a profit margin in the middle there. That we know for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So we've established our blockchain. We've established Web3 as a concept, as an environment. Let's start honing it in. So, people are going to be interested about takeaways here in terms of actions that they can take. And I'm sure we're going to get to those at the end. So let's continue down. So now you're on the internet, you're using websites, you're creating accounts. We know now how it's working, or how we don't really know how it's working. Let's start to formulate a world of what it could look like at its best. And how would that start to take shape?
Yeah, so I think that a world at its best and the world at its worst could potentially look about the same visually in terms of what the product is going to end up being. So that's one of the things that scares me most about the situation, as someone working in the space. And what I mean by that is what consumers are going to likely use to engage with the Web3 blockchain internet. They're going to use crypto wallets, right? And so we know a lot about crypto wallets today. Maybe we don't, but I've been around them for so long, it feels like we do. But Coinbase being one of the big popular ones, it's easy to name drop that. And I think at least a fair amount of people have probably heard the name before. But Coinbase provides a crypto wallet to their users. They actually provide 2 or 3 different versions of a crypto wallet. But the most popular version is a Coinbase custodied crypto wallet. And so what they're doing is they're eating a lot of the transaction fees of exchanging cryptocurrencies in order to provide a cheap trading platform for their users to buy and sell cryptocurrencies. And so they are probably the market leaders in terms of crypto wallets, for consumers at least. There's maybe Ledger, which is more of a hardware wallet. There are a few like browser wallets like MetaMask that, you could argue are more popular. But in terms of like entry points for consumers, it's probably this or maybe Kraken or Binance, but it's probably Coinbase. And
so let's describe. So this is not a physical wallet, obviously.
Right.
This is a plugin that, you can connect. It's an account that you create on a website. And then how does that translate into your experience on the internet?
So these two things are not connected yet is basically the problem, or they're just starting to be connected. But basically, these crypto wallets will have like a browser inside of their app. So basically, it's like your Venmo account and Google Chrome had a baby, right? And they're all into one, so that when you go to your favorite website to like check out and buy things, you're just linking to that wallet that's already in the same browser environment. That's what made MetaMask so popular as a plugin for Google Chrome, is because people were engaging with most of these Web3, blockchain websites through their computer, not necessarily through the phone. And so having that little application attached to their browser made it functionally a lot easier to use Web3 websites. But you can think of it as sort of looking like sign on with Google. That's basically what it is. You're going to go to any website you want. You're going to see the crypto wallet you use, hopefully, or at least as long as your crypto wallet adheres to this standard or that standard, then any crypto wallet will probably be useful. But you'll sign in with whatever wallet provider you use. And the thing that scares me about that is there's self-custody wallets and then there's company custodied wallets. And the company custodied wallets, right, are going to have to provide additional value in order to charge their customers something. And what they're going to probably be offering them is monetization of their digital identities as we come to better value that as a tangible asset that consumers actually have. And we could very much end up in the exact same scenario we're in now, where consumers are very uneducated about the value of their data, and they're working with a brokerage that is basically selling their data for less than it's worth, just because they're packaging it at scale and their clients really aren't the users, they're the corporate buyers on the other end of it. And so they're going to be looking to provide pricing breaks to those corporate partners and tell consumers potentially that their data is less valuable. And it's not like consumers wouldn't be able to pick up and start using their own crypto wallets if this started happening and potentially fight back. But I think information around why it's so important which wallet you choose and like how that wallet information is being utilized is really important, because if they're providing a wallet software, it might not be the vault that I'm talking about. It might be something that they have on their cloud servers that they're doing other things with that would be very Web 2-esque, but they're providing you the illusion of a Web 3 product. And then they're doing all of the Web 2 work, but making it, or Web 3 work, but they're making it a Web 2 experience for you without really giving you the rights or the benefits of owning your data.
Okay, so how much is my data worth? You know, do you have an idea of that monetary value?
Yes. So basically what experts, kind of more economic forecasting experts would say is your data is probably worth about $2,000 a year to you, potentially. My estimate's more north of $10,000, but it's predicated on primarily the fact that that basically we wouldn't sell our data for as cheaply as it's being sold now. Current estimates are based off of basically in like opaque markets where a lot of reselling and intermediaries have inserted themselves and inflated the value and cost of data. But at the same time, certain data points that are harder to get are being like sold for kind of really undervalued by comparison. And if users were kind of the intermediaries here, we would actually start to see real market prices around demographic data and any associated information, probably based off of demographics. Again, that's probably where ethical concerns come in, but those same ethical concerns are there with the advertising technology environment today. So,
okay. So let's go into the best case, back to that best case scenario then.
Sure.
I'm logging on. I've picked my crypto wallet, which may not exist. The one that in this theoretical space. We'll go into actual ones in a little bit. But and I have my browser. It collects my data. And what does this have to do with my crypto wallet? And then what kind of interaction could I have with a website like Google or like a website like Amazon when I go on there to do some shopping, for example?
So there's a couple of different questions in there, right?
Yeah. Take me through the whole theoretical mental process, I guess.
Yeah. So basically what's going on here, this is where the condom analogy kind of comes in, right? And I'm going to point out to what I would say is like sort of the market leader in the space, Brave browser. They're like DuckDuckGo, but in Web3. And so DuckDuckGo for a lot of people is the privacy first Chrome browser. People who are frustrated with Google stalking them all over the internet have turned to DuckDuckGo, but they're all starting to kind of, not all of them, but many people are starting to turn to Brave browser for the exact same reason. And it's because they're in DuckDuckGo, they're guaranteeing your privacy and they're encrypting basically your internet traffic so that you can remain private while you're browsing the internet, which is important to some people. And I think that's definitely a right that you should have. So Brave is kind of providing that exact same environment, but they're providing it utilizing a crypto wallet. And they started out as a browser, but like I said, because the browser environment lends itself very well to also being sort of the environment where you engage with your crypto wallet and your cryptocurrencies, we've seen that product feature set kind of merge in a way. And so what are you doing with these digital assets? Like what is this all about, right? So right now there's NFTs. digital collectibles, at least in everyone else's mind. But to a software engineer, it's a serial number for a piece of information in a database, right? Which is getting back to what we were talking about earlier, which is as software developers start to agree on what does the data model look like for a social media profile, and we can say that, abstractly, an account on Twitter, an account on Pinterest, an account on Facebook have all of these pieces of information in common. This is the generic data set that captures all of those, right? You can start to attach a unique identifier to it and use that identifier so that when you go to, let's say, future social media app on blockchain, whatever, they know that you have the social media data kind of stored behind this NFT for your profile already set up in your crypto wallet. So when you go to that social media account, you don't have to set up your account. It just loads everything in with the information you've already designated from your other profiles. You could potentially be bringing your audience over with that.
And I see. So you could design yourself as a person, your data, your connections, your audience, everything as an NFT profile. And you're going to these websites and saying, this is me.
I own me. These are me traits that I've verified over time. And then you can say that my traits have also been verified by all of these other apps that I've used, if you'd like.
All existing on the blockchain, verifiable. Okay, yep.
Reputation, identity grows out of this. But this is also where the dystopian, psyopsy kind of stuff kind of comes in also, because people see digital identity, authentication of this sorts being sort of ominous in its own way.
Well, it's interesting. The more decentralized it is, the less ominous it feels. It feels like because we do this in real life. We exist in the world. I have my basement filled with all of my weird shit. I have my friends. It does exist. It's just in a very decentralized space, which is reality, right? And then if you go into a virtual environment like this, and I walk into a store, but now virtually, all that's still true. I have my physical wallet, everything. But as long as it's kind of in that decentralized reality, where everyone else is existing and we can all, as long as I get to still make the choice, no one's allowed in my basement to see my shit unless I tell them they can't look, unless I film my basement and put it on the internet like I'm doing right now. Okay, interesting. So I go to Amazon.com. I want to do some shopping. Amazon or our social media platform. Amazon notices I'm there. They ping me. What's that kind of transaction? What could that look like?
So I imagine, it's really not going to look terribly different than going to Amazon to purchase something today. The biggest difference is that a lot of Amazon's tracking software on you is probably not going to work if you're using one of these privacy browsers, right? Whether it's DuckDuckGo or Brave, it doesn't have to be a Web3 browser to provide the protection that, a lot of these Web3, products are claiming to provide. You just need to encrypt your network traffic. You need to block most of their tracking software to prevent, sort of cookies from being stored on your profile. There's a huge movement in sort of the internet industry to remove cookies in general, especially third-party cookies tracking people across the internet. But what we're seeing is them doing the same thing on the server side. So it's more in name than in reality. But because you're coming with an encrypted browser to their server, unless you log into your account on Amazon, which they would require you to check out, the amount of information that you provide to them moving forward could be restricted, because they would really only need to know that you have a verified profile and that you can afford to pay for whatever you're purchasing and where you're sending what you're purchasing. And so you wouldn't theoretically need to log in, right, to kind of complete that purchase. It would actually be up to Amazon, though, to decide whether or not you have to share additional pieces of information. And that's where user choice probably butts up against scale, organizations. But, if there are other competing Amazons that start to come up, because one of Amazon's core advantages is its large data silo, and that starts to atrophy and become less useful, less productive, less of a differentiator for them over time, you could see them start to weaken in a lot of these areas from, smaller competitors offering the same thing that Amazon does, but without, asking you to provide all of this information about yourself, right? And users may, if the price is competitive and the service is competitive, move over and opt for the better choice. But, while they still have other things in their favor in the market, you might feel obligated to still give up that information to Amazon in exchange for the service. But they could also change their business model. Prime could have different tiers of membership based on the amount of data you're sharing with them, right? There's ways that they can get creative with this as well. I don't think it's all necessarily bad. But if the user starts to actually earn money on their income and it's their choice to share it, I think that's a step in the right direction.
If we remove the black box, there's still going to be a data transaction. But what you're saying is that there's the potential for websites to say, we would like to access your data and use it. What is your market price for your own data? Or like, here's an offer, and they could potentially buy access to your data personally from you, and you can monetize your own identity online in that way.
I think one of the easiest ways to think about that right now is just looking at like newsletter media businesses, right? They're paid somewhere on the order of $5 to $20 to get one email address in their newsletter. So if they just paid that $5 to $20 directly to the person whose email they wanted, they could cut out the advertising middleman, right? And just pay the person to read their content. But instead, they have to spend all this money on the advertising systems to try to get the one ad placement or the several ad placements in front of the right person and hope that they click on it, go check out your content, and then subscribe. But we know that the media companies are willing to pay between $5 and $20 to get that email address. So think that that's the potential every media company has to pay individuals just to acquire their email address. Like that's the budget for it.
Email's interesting. It's very Web3 in a because it's kind of our unique identifier right now. I've got my email address that I've had for 15 years or whatever, and that's my internet unique identifier. And it's kind of a secret. I don't tell everyone my email address, and when I do, I know that I'm giving away a piece of information that can be utilized for marketing. So what happens to email in the Web3 universe?
So it's kind of like, we're seeing lots of like different communication protocols start to emerge. So, like WhatsApp and Telegram competitors that, for something like Telegram that's supposedly already built on the same, cryptographic hashing mechanism, it was Web3 in its own way before, kind of blockchain. Because I think blockchain really distorts the Web3 movement as like too much of an emphasis or a focus sometimes. Because it's more about user-owned data and choice in like optionality in operating and moving around the internet. The composable element that I think is so much more important to Web3 and to, being a type 1 planet. It is about accessing that information and structuring it so that we can have, this well-communicating society down the road. But anyways, so there are these encrypted messaging protocols that exist. Will they replace email? Sure, maybe if like enough people adopt them. I think ultimately, people are probably going to continue to use the same technologies they're using today. It's going to evolve somewhat. We've seen a lot more of like Slack channel or Discord channel-esque environments for people to communicate and congregate. It's blurring the lines between forums and image boards and social media sites. So I think people will just continue to communicate in whatever is most convenient and contextually relevant for the conversation. And to that end, I don't think email is really going to go anywhere. Will someone come out with a Web3 email? Yeah, probably, absolutely. There's probably going to be a bunch of them. It's just, will it provide enough value to people where they want to use it over Gmail? And will it be affordable for them to use over Gmail? those are the questions that I think, need to be answered for something like that to actually happen.
Something that you said earlier really struck me. Amazon's data silo, everything that's powering AWS, the Amazon Web Services, it has an expiration date. All that data belongs to people who are alive now. I mean, if you really want to look at it, but they're going to die at some point and that data will be useless, right? Their data profile will no longer be available or will no longer be useful. So that expiration date seems like a very powerful, I guess the way to put it would be a negotiating chip, against a company like Amazon, and saying, what if there's a system that's more dynamic? You're not just siloing the data. The data is existing as with people, and they're carrying it around and they're utilizing it. And in that decentralized model, they're able to make the decisions of when their data is used or when it isn't. And when it is used, they have the ability to negotiate on their own behalf. So this is a very beautiful utopian kind of perspective on the internet, but it seems possible to me. I mean, is that something that occurs to you? Is that,
Yes. So I love this wavelength that you're going down. This is one of my favorite parts about Web3 in my mind, and as like a data scientist. And so to your point, basically recency bias in most of these predictive algorithms, it'll be dependent on, anywhere between the last 2 weeks to the last 2 years of data. Now, there's lots of larger macro trends that need to be kind of observed on.
You said recency bias. Can you just explain that?
Bias.
Can you explain that term really quick?
Yeah. So I think it's a psychological term that I'm applying to data science here, just to clarify. But recency bias would just mean that the algorithm has a predisposition to weight recent data more heavily than older data, because it's more representative of what's trending at the moment than something older.
Great. Okay, great. All right, continue.
Okay, cool.
That's very helpful to clarify.
I never know what I'm supposed to define or not,
It's all right. That's why I'm here, because I'm kind of the moron about it. So.
So with the recency bias, right? Many things are really important in short-term predictions in order to be able to really impact the economy at the level that we're trying to impact. Like advertising placements are getting decided in fractions of a millisecond. Like this is near instantaneous decision making, and so in some of these cases, the last 2 minutes, the last 2 hours of data is more important than the last 2 weeks. And it really just depends on the scale at which you're trying to make a prediction and the speed at which you're trying to make a prediction. But to the extent that, kind of these people who are much older, whose profiles and identities are dying, I think if that data set was cleaner, meaning we could deduce who the real people were from who the bot people were, then, their data points would actually probably add quite a bit of value to us over time, because they're reference points for like social, political, cultural beliefs at a moment in time, with respect to wherever the culture is at the current moment. And so you could look at some of the different metadata and the metrics around that to see how that data has fluctuated over the larger time period. And so in that essence, like the breadcrumb of their data would still remain valuable to anyone, I guess, trying to make predictions off of cultural and social trends. But yeah, to the extent that like the level of granularity we need to encapsulate that information, we don't need it probably day by day. I'm sure year by year, like summaries of their information, which really condenses down the size of the file we're storing for them. It kind of goes, it's all dependent on the time scale that you're looking at it in, really, is kind of what I'm getting at.
Okay. Got it. So just in terms of, we've looked at this theoretical perspective of what the internet could look like. But here we are now in the present. We're laying down the foundation for what the internet's going to be, in the future. And a big part of that is setting the norms. And a big part of setting the norms is educating the masses, right? And I think that's something that we both agree, and it's why we're doing this, is we're trying to figure out how can people be better educated about how their data is being utilized and what they can do now to start taking action in such a way where not only is it better for the future, but it's better for them right now because they have more capabilities. It's very difficult to convince someone who is like, I don't care if they take my data. The ads that I see, I like. I want to buy that shit, you know? So how do you talk to that person and tell them about Brave, tell them about crypto wallets, tell them about DuckDuckGo, that kind of stuff?
Well, in all honesty, I just mostly have the conversation we've been having today. And so if we don't get to the point where like they're excited about crypto and Web3 after going through this information, it's not anything that I would say that I'm necessarily doing wrong or that they're misunderstanding. It's just really where crypto and Web3 is at today. It doesn't have a really strong consumer-friendly environment. And so I think for many users, if the privacy element or the private financial exchange element isn't what's selling you, there aren't a whole ton of other useful products out there for the average person today. One of the more interesting conversations I was having, but I haven't seen any projects develop around this, was in the context of women's rights and Roe v. Wade being overturned. There are menstrual apps out there that women will use that piece of biometric health data could potentially be weaponized against them in any sort of court of law. If they're, to understand, well, this says you should have been pregnant and then something happened. Like, I don't know. That's not my realm of expertise. But the main point here is, I think that the pieces of information, data, and functionality that would go into building a period tracker app's relatively lightweight. It would provide instant value to an entire segment of people who want to have the functionality of being able to use modern tools to make their lives easier, right? But without being worried about someone else having access to that data and weaponizing it against them. But to my knowledge, no one has built this crypto wallet. No one has built this decentralized application. And so that would be a practical consumer, tool that would be valuable today, but it's not out there. I think that developers need to sort of really reframe the mindset about their approach to building on the blockchain and Web3. Are we just building new financial systems and tools, or are we trying to build a more decentralized computer, a more, equitable internet, and by extension, hopefully more of an equitable economy offline? But if there are those projects, they're still kind of under the radar, which being in a bear market, being kind of over the hype of this past cycle of crypto, I think that's too many founders' advantages to be off the radar, so that, when good financial times return, they're emerging with a strong, well-tested, well-developed product. And that's when they want their name recognition to get out there and get mixed up with the hype of everything else that's going on with a resurgent, economic environment. I do my best to kind of try to seek out and find, who's working on what, because you can usually find little interviews here and there on stuff like Cointelegraph, Blockworks, but there's no consistent, announcements that I'm seeing of real consumer products with a useful product for, my mom to just, hop on here and have a real reason to interact with the technology. And there's no selling someone on that at this point. You need to have something useful to sell. And so that kind of gets back to what I feel like I'm building, what I think is valuable, which is how do I help content creators take ownership of their data and make it valuable? Because them organizing and managing their data today would be directly valuable to them, regardless of whether or not their data lives in Web3 applications and tooling. And in the process of setting that up for content creators, you'd be also setting it up for their users, their audience, and kind of the entire social network that engages with a specific branded content series.
I love that. And to even take that model and go beyond it, go to people who are the communicators, who are the thought leaders, the influencers, and to kind of, I mean, that's what this all is, Connor, is marketing. You know, the whole Type 1 Planet, for example.
It's all storytelling.
It's all storytelling. It's all marketing. It's figuring out how we can take really great ideas and make them accessible. And I'm so appreciative to you for the work that you're doing and for taking your time today to do this. And I gotta say, I mean, it sounds like in the future there might have to be some sort of a crypto wallet Type 1 Planet project, and we're gonna have to get a little roundtable going.
Would love to be in on the conversation for sure. Toss my hat in the ring.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna be in touch with you, you know, soon to see if we can get some of those names, some of those people, some of those resources. And if we do get them on the show, you would be incorporated into that conversation very quickly afterwards, I think.
Awesome. Well, you know, it's always a pleasure chatting with you, Robert. Like, I love the energy of Type 1 Planet. I'm obviously very much aligned with the mission, and anything I can do to keep pumping this out here, you know?
Dude, we'll be in touch.
All right. Thank you.
You're the best, man. Thank you.
You too.